Well, good morning. Happy Easter to all of you. So good to see all of you here. My name is Hosea, and I lived about 2,700 years ago, about 700 years before Jesus and Easter, and so I didn't know about those things until later, after I died, and I'll tell you that part of the story a little later on. But I'm going to tell you the story of my life today. And that might seem like a strange thing on an Easter morning because, it's not the story. It's not the cross and the empty tomb. But it is a story about forgiveness. It is a story about life where there seemed to be only death. It's a story about God bringing hope when it was least expected. When Jesus died on that Friday afternoon, those who loved him, his followers, his disciples, all that night and all the next day and that night, they were in absolute despair because they just could not see from that point how things could ever get good again, how God could ever fix or redeem that situation. But he did when he raised his son from the dead. And I guess you could say, I know a little bit about that kind of story. So let me tell you about my life. I'll start by telling you that I was a prophet, which was a great job. I loved being a prophet. It was such a good fit for me. When I was a child, I was always one of those kids who was really concerned with right and wrong, really bothered when someone was breaking the rules, and God's people, Israel, were breaking a lot of rules. And so when God called me, when he spoke to me and said, Hosea, I want you to be my mouthpiece. I want you to speak my words to my people, Israel. I jumped at the chance because I knew that Israel was in terrible sin, worshiping idols, doing all sorts of awful things. And it broke my heart. And I knew that it broke God's heart. And so he said, Hosea, will you speak for me? And I said, absolutely, God, I'm your man. And I'll never forget what God said next. He said, Hosea, are you really my man? And I said, well, yeah, of course, God. I had no idea what I was in for. So a little while later, God spoke, and he said, Hosea, I have a message for my people that I want to deliver through you. And I said, well, that's what I signed up for, God. You give me the words, and I'll proclaim them. And God said, well, that's the thing, Hosea. It's not really words that I want to use. It's your life. I want my message to come through the story of your life to my people. And that didn't make a lot of sense to me. I said, oh, okay, God, well, what do you want me to do? And God said, well, good news, Hosea, you're going to get married. I found you a wife. And I said, well, that's great. I've actually been praying for a wife. I've really been feeling like I was ready for that. And here God is answering my prayer. That's fantastic. What's her name, God? And God said, her name is Gomer. Now, in my language, we would say Gomer, which I think is much prettier, but for you Americans here today, we'll say Gomer, okay? And I said, God, I don't think I know a Gomer. I mean, maybe one. Is that the name of that girl who hangs out down by the, well, I mean, it wouldn't be her, right, God? I think she's a prostitute. And God said, yeah, that's the one. That's Gomer. I want you to marry her. I want you to have children with her. You can imagine how I felt about that. I said, God, no. There must be some kind of mistake. God, I'm your man, remember? I'm going to be your prophet. That means I need to marry a nice little Jewish girl who keeps the law the way that I do so we can honor you with our lives and I can be your spokesperson. And God, marrying a girl like that would absolutely ruin my ministry. I mean, no one's going to listen to me or take me seriously if I'm married to her. And God, I have saved myself for marriage. And I don't think she has. And what are my parents going to think? What are my friends going to say? God, this will not only ruin my ministry, this will ruin my life. And God said, Hosea, are you my man? I said, well, yes, God. I mean, if that's really what you want, are you sure? God said, yes, Hosea, I want you to trust me in this. And then he said, oh, and one more thing you should probably know, Hosea. Yeah, what's that? She won't be faithful. Great. So I married her. At first I had this hope that it wouldn't work, that God's plan would just fail because she wouldn't be interested in me. It's not like we have any of the same friends or the same interests, but actually, to my surprise, she was really flattered by my attention. I don't think that a guy like me had ever been nice to her before. Probably she had never thought she'd be able to get married, and so to my surprise, she responded to my pursuit of her. Kind of. It was this really awkward courtship because I was just going through the motions and she wasn't giving me her whole heart. I'd catch her flirting with other guys and stuff, It just seemed ridiculous that I should have to pursue this woman when we both knew that neither of our hearts were in it. But, I wanted to honor God, and so I tried. I sort of tried. It was tough right from the beginning. As you can imagine, she took me for granted right from the start. I was angry right from the start. Not a great foundation for a marriage. My mom, she said to me, you're not going to be able to change her. I said, yeah, I know, Mom. But, for a while, things weren't actually that bad. I gave it my best, and she seemed to be, genuinely committed at first, and we had kids. Oh, and I love my kids. And surprisingly, she really loved our kids. She was, in a lot of ways, a really good mom. And I started to see some things in her, some qualities that probably no one else had ever seen before. She had a big heart. She really did care about people. She loved animals. She was always doing these little things around our house to make it more like a home. And it started to feel for a while like we were becoming a little family, at least in the beginning. And then I guess you could say the real her started to come out. At first it had felt like she really liked the fact that I was this good guy. I was upright and holy and keeping the law. Later it started to feel like she maybe kind of resented that. And then she started to be gone more. And then she started to be gone nights. And at first I tried so hard to keep track of her. Where had she been? Where was she going? Who was she with? Eventually I gave up on all that. That woman could lie. I honestly think she believed some of the lies that she was telling me. And talking to her didn't do any good. I would say, your family loves you. We need you here. Those guys don't care about you. And you're not safe out there. She wouldn't listen. She just rolled her eyes and told me to stop preaching at her. So we started to live this life where we were both just pretending. I was miserable. I was angry. She felt guilty, but not guilty enough to change, not guilty enough to do anything about it. It got to the point where I recognized that I had just stopped thinking about the future. Because how could the future be any good? There was nothing on the horizon. I was just kind of living day to day, and maybe you've been there. Maybe you've gotten to a place where you kind of lost hope because it was just hard to see how things could ever get better. Well, back then I used to walk by this place. It's called the Valley of Achor, which in our language means the Valley of Trouble. A long time ago, even for me, a man named Achan brought great trouble on the people of Israel by his sin. And a whole lot of people died in a battle for the city of Ai. And so when Achan was punished, they buried him in this valley. And they called it the Valley of Achor, the Valley of Trouble. Anyway, I used to walk by there, and internally, just in my head, I started to call it my valley, Hosea's valley. Because that's how my life felt. My life just felt like trouble. One day she overheard me saying something to the kids. We were walking along, and one of the kids says, "Daddy, what's that place?" And it's just this ugly little place. Little brown bushes and weeds and dirt, And I said, "Oh, that's Daddy's Valley." Ha ha, Little joke, but only to me, and she heard, and I caught her eye, and I knew how I'd made her feel, which was sort of my point. She was ruining my life, I wanted her to know it. I felt so bad for the kids. I felt so bad for them. They would come to me and they'd say, "Where's Mommy?" And I'd say, "I don't know. Mommy's out with some friends." And I got so tired of defending her. I got so tired of pretending. One night she came home and I said, "You know what? I can't defend you anymore. And I can't pretend anymore. So you can continue to live in this house if you want to, but as far as I'm concerned, we're not husband and wife." She said that was fine. She said she'd felt that way for a long time. And the kids heard us. And they took my side. And I didn't defend her. She ran out of the house crying. So I went to bed that night. Couldn't sleep. I just lay there. And somewhere in the middle of the night, this thought came to me. It never crossed my mind before, and I wish so badly that it never had. But it was actually because of something that God had said way back at the beginning of this thing. He'd said, "Hosea, take to yourself an adulterous wife and children of unfaithfulness." Children of unfaithfulness. And I started to think, my kids, they don't look a lot like me. Oh. And I was so angry. I was so mad. I went running out of the house. I said, "God, do you realize what you have done to me? You have ruined my life. My friends and my family have all deserted me. I'm a failed prophet with a prostitute wife. I don't even know if my kids are mine. Do you have any idea the amount of pain that you have caused me?" And God said, "Yes, Hosea. Yes, I do." And then I got it. Then I saw. This is how it feels to have someone receive all of your love and then turn around and give their love to someone else. This is how it feels to be taken for granted, to be cheated on. This is how God feels. And then I realized God really was telling his story through my life. I still wasn't happy about it, but it did make me feel a little better, because all along I'd felt so alone. I'd felt like there was no one out there who understood my situation, and now there was one who understood. God knew exactly what I was going through. Amazingly, I knew exactly what God was going through. I started to feel sorry for him. So, when she came back home, she came crawling back, and it was pathetic, because she didn't confess that she'd done anything wrong. She didn't apologize to me or the kids. She didn't, thank me for any of the good things I had done for her. She just sort of said, "Well, I want to come back." But I wasn't that mad. I said, "Fine, come on back." And I just talked to God about it. I said, "So God, this is how it feels, huh? This is how it feels to be you." It actually started to strengthen my commitment to God. I started to think, God, I will never do that to you. I've probably done it to you before, but I will never again receive all of your love and all of your kindness and then turn around and give my love to someone or something else. I won't do that to you, God. I started to feel like I understood God a little better, and we grew closer. I used to walk by the Valley of Achor and say, "Yeah, God, you and me, huh? Nothing but trouble from those we love." And I started to see things happening around me more from God's perspective. As a nation, we were not doing very well. We were in financial trouble, and there were all of these enemy nations surrounding us that seemed to be getting stronger as we were getting weaker. There was always the threat of war. And there were a couple of great big empires out there on the move, just threatening to come through and wipe us out. And I started to think, God, I think I'd wipe us out. I mean, honestly, God, knowing now how you feel, knowing how your people have treated you, I can't believe you didn't do it a long time ago. I can't believe how patient you've been with us, God. Well, it wasn't long before things started to go badly at home again. I mean, she made an effort for a little while, but pretty soon we were back to the same old thing. You know, she was gone more and more. One night she came home with bruises. And I told her again, I said, they don't care about you. And you're not safe out there without me. Didn't matter. She didn't change. But I started to change. I started to get bitter again. I started to think, you know what? Whatever happens to her out there, it's exactly what she deserves. She has brought this on herself. And she could see that I was starting to give up. One day I came in from the field and she'd packed her stuff. She said, well, I guess I'm leaving. And I said, fine. I mean, I was just numb at that point. You know, I knew the trouble that she was in for out there. I knew what might happen to her. But the truth is, I wanted her to experience that. I wanted her to feel it. I wanted to punish her. That's the truth. Yeah. So she left. And I started to adjust to life without her, you know, just me and the kids. And the truth is, it was nice. It was peaceful. I mean, I was still really angry, still really disappointed at, I guess, the missed opportunities of my life. You know, I hadn't turned out to be the prophet I wanted to be. But I didn't have a lot of time to think about that. There were chores to do. There were kids to feed, bills to pay. So I just kind of lowered my head and focused on the day-to-day. I was just moving on. I would hear about her out around town. People would say things. And people would ask me, hey, do you want to know what's going on with Gomer? And I'd say, no, you know, I really don't. I've put all that behind me. I'm just moving on. And then one day God spoke again. He said, Hosea. Yes, God. God said, Hosea, do you have any money? I said, well, yeah, God, I think I have a little money, maybe 15 shekels. God said, good. Okay, Hosea, I want you to take all your money, go down to the slave market. Great. I said, God, you know, is this another one of those things that you're going to do where you want to tell your story through my life, you know? And God said, no, Hosea, same story. It's Gomer. She's down at the slave market, and they're selling her today. Oh, I tell you what, there was nothing in me that wanted to go down to that market. I mean, I hate that place anyway, you know, but the thought of inviting her back into my life, after all that she put me through, you know, I couldn't think of anything more painful or less appealing than that. And the thought that I would have to pay money to do it, that's ridiculous. That just seemed crazy. But I know better at this point than to argue with God. I said, okay, God, I'm your man. And I went. I gathered up my money and I went down to the market. So when I got there, I saw her right away. She was up there on the stage, you know, in the shackles. She had bruises. She had a black eye. She looked terrible. I mean, she's pretty. You know, she's always been pretty, but she just looked empty. And they had taken everything they wanted from her. And now they were going to sell her as a slave to make a few more shekels. It was just like I said. It was just like I said. And the funny thing is, she had left me because she wanted to be free. She wanted to be free from me. She wanted to be free from responsibility, free to do whatever she wanted. Now she was a slave. I saw some of the other people who were there kind of mingling around, checking out what was available. figuring out if they might want to bid on someone, you know. I saw this one guy. I know him from around town. Can't stand this guy. This great, big guy, mean, selfish, rich. I started to think, what would life be like for her in his home? And a part of me said, well, that's exactly what she deserves. She has brought it on herself. But then her turn came, and they brought her forward, and the auctioneer started talking about her, about how pretty she was, how much she might be worth. And something inside of me said, hey, that's my wife you're talking about. And then before I knew it, the bidding started. And big guy, the rich guy, he says, 2 shekels. Oh, and something inside of me just snapped. I looked around that marketplace and I realized I'm the only one here who can protect her. I'm the only one here who would have any desire to protect her. And I'm the only one here who knows that she's got some really good qualities. She's a good mom. She's got a big heart. She loves people. She cares. And with the parents she had, she never really had a chance. They didn't love her the way that they were supposed to. This life that she found herself in, it's the only way she's ever known to get by. And there is no way that I'm going to let that guy. So I said, 3 shekels. And then, the whole marketplace, they all turn and look at me. And they all know who I am. So then all the whispering starts, all the rumors, What do I care at this point? My reputation around town is pretty much shot. So, but then the rich guy, he says 5 shekels. He looks right at me. Because now he knows. Now he knows that she's mine, and that's why he wants her, because he's that evil. And I looked at her up there on that stage, so vulnerable and afraid and confused. And I didn't look back at him. I just looked right in her eyes, and I said, 15 shekels. 15 shekels and all the food in my house, everything I have. And it got really quiet. And he backed down. And I walked up on stage and I said, let's go home. So we started walking home. I didn't really know what to say, so we were just walking in silence. And she just kept looking up at me as we're walking along. She just kept looking at me. And after a little while, she said, I'll pay you back. I had laughed. I looked at her, I said, we both know you can't pay me back. And then I just kept walking. We walked along a little further. And she said, okay then, I'll be your slave. You bought me and I belong to you now, so I'm your slave. So we'll build a little house, a little room off the back of the house, and I'll live there and I'll serve you and the kids and I'll be your slave. And I stopped walking, and I turned and looked at her, and what I said next, I don't know where it came from. I think it was the Spirit of God speaking through me. I said, let's get something straight. You don't owe me anything, and you are not my slave. You're my wife. Now let's go home. Well, I guess that was pretty romantic because she started to cry, and, I didn't really know what to say, so I just kept walking. And then we came around the corner, and there was the valley of Achor, the valley of trouble. And it was spring. And it had rained a little bit the night before. And the place was transformed. I'd never seen it so beautiful. Little green bushes and green grasses, little desert flowers popping up everywhere. It was amazing. And we were both just sort of stunned. We just stood there looking at it, and then she took my hand. And it was like we knew that this was our life, that where there had been only death, God had brought beauty and life. And I just knew from that moment on that things were going to be different. And things were actually different. She had been changed, really changed this time. It was almost like before that day, she had never really believed that I loved her. Probably I hadn't. Probably you could say that before that day, neither one of us really knew what love was. But now we did. Now I did. I knew that love, real love, God's kind of love, never gives up. And even pays a price to have the one that it loves. And she knew that she was worth something because I had paid that price. She became a wonderful wife, great mother. We were married 50 years. And I was a much better prophet after that. Because now I understood God's heart. And I faithfully proclaimed God's love, God's hatred of sin, God's holiness, God's faithfulness for the rest of my days. And it was so much easier because now I knew Him. Now I knew that God is like a really good husband who is faithful to the end, even if his bride is not. And that's what I told His people. But the thing about being a prophet is, I guess this is just part of the job, is God calls you to say and do things that you yourself don't fully understand. And of course, I had already experienced that, but that just continued. God called me to say things to His people that didn't make a lot of sense to me. I didn't get to see the fulfillment of all of my prophecies. God called me to tell the story of me and Gomer, but almost as if it had to do with something more than His relationship with the nation of Israel. I didn't really understand it. He started talking about others, that He was going to bring people in from the outside and make them His people too. I didn't get it at the time, but now I do. Now I know that He was talking about you. Now I know that He was planning to pay a price to redeem those who'd been unfaithful to Him so that they could be reconciled to Him. So, after I died, I met the Lord. I won't even begin to try to describe that to you. But He introduced me to His Son, and He told me about the plan. This plan of redemption. What an amazing thing. The Son of God, taking on flesh, coming and living here on earth, loving us despite our rejection of Him. And then going to the cross, paying the price to redeem us from our slavery. And then rising from the dead, conquering what would have crushed us. And what I saw at that point is that we are all Gomer. We're all Gomer. We receive from God everything we need: love, protection. And then we turn and we give our love to other things, lesser things, things that are destructive. We're so stubborn, we seek freedom from the one who loves us. And we end up as slaves. But God looks on us in our slavery, and He will not stand for it. He will not leave us there. He says, "You are mine." And so He paid a price. So, if you have ever felt like you are not very valuable, like maybe you're not worth very much, maybe you're not worth saving, Maybe you felt that way because of some of the things that you've done, or because of some of the things that have been done to you. If that's you, then I would encourage you to look to the cross. And every time you see a cross, that is a reminder of how much you are worth to God, how valuable you are to Him. He gave everything He had. He paid the full price to redeem you because He loves you deeply and He wants you for His own. And if you have ever been without hope, if you have ever looked to the future and just thought, how could things ever get better? Then I would encourage you to look to the empty tomb. And remember that we have a God who brings dead things to life. Believe me, He does. Well, thank you for listening to my story this morning. Let me pray with you. God, you are the God of redemption. You are the God of hope. You are the God of new life. And I would pray for everyone in this room, everyone who hears this message, that you would convince them, God, that they are of great worth to you. That despite what they may have done and even how they may have treated you, you love them deeply and you willingly pay the price to make them your own. Remove all doubt, all self-hatred, all the lies of our enemy, and convince us, God, that you love us like a faithful husband. And then, God, I would pray for anyone who's discouraged, anyone who is in despair, anyone who looks toward the future and the future is bleak. Would you convince them, God, that the same mighty God who raised His Son from the grave delights to bring new life where there has been only death? Would you be our hope this morning, God? We praise you today, God, for your Son, Jesus Christ, for His coming to earth, for His life, for His death, for His resurrection. He is everything to us today. And we pray in His great name. Amen.
Amen.